Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm gonna give everyone just a few seconds to log on. I know that we're just hitting the 9 a.m. mark on the West Coast. I am Shannon Von Felden. I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy at the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases. Welcome to the third day of Virtual Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill 2022 and the coffee chat with NCAT's Acting Director, Dr. Joni Rutter. We are honored to have Dr. Rutter joining us during Rare Disease Week to share with us about NCAT's, its commitment to rare disease research and promising rare disease research. Dr. Rutter is the Acting Director at the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, NCATs. Dr. Rutter is responsible for planning and executing the center's complex and multifaceted preclinical and clinical programs. Before joining NCATs, she served as the Director of Scientific Programs within the All of Us research program of the Precision Medicine Initiative, and prior to that as Director of the Division of Neuroscience and Behavior at the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Dr. Rutter has a presentation she will share, and then we'll have time for questions in the second half of the coffee chat today. Please post any questions you have for Dr. Rutter in the Q&A, and we will try to get to as many as we can. Dr. Rutter, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Shannon, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I very much appreciate being here. It's nice to see you all. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about what we're doing at the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, or NCATs as we like to call it. And today I'm just going to focus on how we're accelerating rare diseases progress. And I'm just going to dig right in and get us started. And I hope you'll have some questions there at the end that we can turn to. But I wanted to start off just by telling you that NCATs is part of the NIH. It is one of the 27 different institutes and centers within the NIH. And so on the left-hand side here, I'm showing you the NIH campus. Now, sometimes what people don't really know is that the NIH campus is largely for the intramural, what we call the intramural side of NIH, and that's where we do a lot of the research in-house. That's only about 10% of what we do at the NIH. The 90% of what we do is actually fund research across the nation. And so I just wanted to give you a sense of the distinction between the two, even though you might be most familiar with the NIH campus. We really fund the research across the country and support all of the activities that are ongoing. And NCATs is the newest IC at the NIH. It is the newest center. And largely what NCATs does is not basic research, which is what you might think of when you think about NIH in general. NIH is the world's premier basic research organization on health knowledge, and there's really nothing like it. And what NCATs brings to the NIH table is that its goal is to really advance basic science into health solutions. And we do this by, on the right-hand side, is sort of our badge, I guess. We develop new approaches, we demonstrate their usefulness, and we disseminate those findings. And so we take the basic research at the NIH, and we move that basic research into preclinical development, clinical research, implementation, and public health. But all along the way, the patient involvement is really at the center. And so that's why we're really proud of this badge. And I think rare diseases and our work on rare diseases really exemplifies this idea. So our mission at NCATs is to turn basic science observations into health solutions. And we do this through a variety of approaches. We use cross-cutting collaborations and partnerships, and I'll talk a little bit about these more today. We have transformative stakeholder and patient engagements. We have robust platforms and technologies that are more predictive for how to move things through the translational pipeline better, faster, and cost effectively. And we do productive risk-taking to remove scientific and operational hurdles that are just prevalent in the scientific work that we do. But it's not always about the science. It can be about operational administrative hurdles, financial hurdles, or things of that nature. And we want to really get that holistic view of the problem and try to tackle everything that we can around that problem. And our whole goal is to bring more treatments to all people more quickly. And I'll tell you a little bit about how we're trying to do that. So I know that the rare disease community is very much aware of how many diseases there are out there. We think that there are about 7,000 or more rare diseases and about 10,000 diseases globally. And the issue that we're facing is that only about 500 therapies exist for those thousands of rare diseases. That's the problem we're trying to tackle here. And so when you look at this little thing on the right-hand side, that number of 500, a little over 500 therapies for these rare diseases, it's not sufficient. We need to do a better job. And so how can we think differently? How can we innovate around getting that bar to go up a little bit more? And so we think about this quite a bit. It's not an easy problem, of course, but some of the things that we're trying to do are listed here. And I'm just going to point out 3 of them as they relate to rare diseases. One is to think about how we expand our repertoire of platform technologies for many diseases at a time. So with that 7,000 rare diseases out there, if we go one at a time, that's going to take us thousands of years to get therapies for all of them. And to the extent possible, we got to do better than that. And so if we can have a many diseases at a time approach, that's going to help us get there. We want to revolutionize rare diseases diagnostic and treatments, and that's another way that we can also tackle this problem too. And engaging stakeholders of all sorts, building trust and nurturing these relationships. And that's why I'm really happy to be here today to meet all of you and hopefully start some new stakeholder engagements as well in this space, because I think that, as I'll say in a little bit, how we do outreach and engagement and how we include patients and patient advocacy groups, that's disruptive technology, and maybe the most disruptive technology at our disposal for making progress in this space. And that's how we're going to bring more treatments to all people more quickly. So at NCATs, I'm an acting director, and I've been in this role now since April of 2020. And since that time, I've been doing a lot of engagements with people and have come up with somewhat of a vision. And my vision is basically 3 audacious goals that I want to outline for you today. And I'm not going to go too deeply in them because I also want to give you some ideas on how we're really using rare diseases to tackle these goals. But the goal number 1 here is to get more treatments, period. Right now, there are 5% of those therapies in the pipeline that we know about. And we want to increase that number 5-fold at the very least to get that number up and start ticking away at that. And so we have new initiatives on how to think about new treatment modalities that can tackle this in a more than one disease at a time pace. And so that's one goal that we have. The second goal that I have is to have really all people involved. We want more treatments to all people. So how do we make sure that happens? And this is to be very inclusive of the idea that for rare diseases, there's very little commercial interest, because people with rare diseases, there may be only 1 of you, or there may be 10 of you, or there may be 100 of you with rare diseases. And with those kinds of numbers, there's not going to be a lot of commercial interest or market incentives to be able to entice pharmaceutical companies to really think about treatments. And so if we can build platform technologies that can help us address more than one disease at a time, that will be really spectacular in helping us do so. So that's the second goal. The third goal is to get there more quickly. And again, I've talked a little bit about this many diseases at a time strategy, and decreasing the rare disease diagnostic odyssey is something I'm going to talk a little bit more as we go forward. But there are a variety of things that we can do here that I think will help us reach that first goal as well. So those are the 3 audacious goals that we have at NCATs, and rare diseases play a really big part in this. And at NCATs, we have a home for rare diseases, and I'm really excited to say this very explicitly. A lot of the work that we do is focused on rare diseases, both in our intramural program here within Bethesda, and also in our extramural community through a variety of programs that we support across the nation. And I just last night we did a lighting ceremony on the NIH campus it's called Building 38. Building 38 is home to the National Library of Medicine, and it was a wonderful partnership with them that they agreed to allow their building to be lit up like this to really show and bring awareness to the rare disease community and the rare disease work that we're doing at the NIH. And NCATs has supported this effort, and we're really excited that we were able to do this year. And I hope it's really effective for those people driving down across from the NIH on the roads to see this and say, hey, what's that all about? And then all of a sudden we have more people who are aware of rare diseases. So this is a good opportunity for us. But I want to tell you about a little bit more about what we're doing in the rare disease space. So you know that there are about 30 million people with rare diseases in the United States. And you also know the definition. And I've talked to you a little bit about the issues around the idea that rare diseases are they're not very prevalent and in one given disease, but they're prevalent in the aggregation of those diseases. But given that, that's very difficult for us to really entice the commercial and market incentives to create therapeutics for this. And so these are some of the ideas that we want to tackle. Now, there are many different causes of rare diseases. Most of them are directly caused by changes in genes or chromosomes. And this gives us a handle on how we can start to tackle those therapeutics. And I'm happy to dive into the science of that. Probably won't speak to that too much today, but I'm happy to talk about that if you have any questions about it. And then the other concern around rare diseases is that most of the patients face a diagnostic odyssey. That means that it's a big struggle for them to get diagnosed with their rare disease. And even when they do, it's really still the beginning of a longer battle within the healthcare system. They're still not very visible in the healthcare system, even if they have been diagnosed. And so these are challenges that we have in the rare disease space, but there are also a lot of opportunities. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those opportunities that we do have. At NCATS, we are home to the Office of the Rare Disease Research, ORDR as it's known, and Dr. PJ Brooks is the acting director of this office. And Parisur, she retired. She's a new grandmother, and she's retired to spend time with her family. And so we wish her very well. And PJ is stepping in to take over. And for those of you who may or may not know PJ, he won't skip a beat, and we're really excited to have him take the helm for a little bit until we can do a national search. And then these are the folks within the office who are working on rare disease research. And of course, our unofficial mascot is included in this, and that's the zebra. I'm sure you're very familiar, but this is the team who really gets it done. It's a great group of people who are dedicated to this mission of rare diseases. So our rare disease office has a variety of different approaches, thinking about different resources and tools under knowledge and data on the left-hand side. We do a variety of research and collaborations. Many of you may know about the Rare Disease Clinical Research Network. I won't talk about those as much today, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the research that we support. And then we have a large effort in community engagement and a plug-in for the Rare Disease Day at NIH coming up on February 28th. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of these as we go forward. And I'll just also mention that our NCATS labs are very much involved in doing the science behind here, but I'm not going to talk as much about this and stick to a little bit more of the resources. But I did want to tell you that this is a group that is studying rare diseases at a more than one disease at a time pace and really making headway to help us tackle the rare disease problem of getting more treatments to all people more quickly. Now, in terms of the knowledge and resources, there are a variety of resources that we have available within NCATS. GUARD, Toolkit, and RADAR are probably the most used resources. GUARD is the Genetic and Rare Disease Information Center, and we are just launching, as we speak, a beta version of GUARD 2.0. So we're not completely finished with this yet. We're still working on a variety of factors, but we do have a beta version up. And if you'd like to take a look at that and give us any feedback that you have, we would be more than happy to have that. But GUARD is a wonderful resource that helps us be an interface with the patient community. You can find general information on rare diseases in general, find what clinical trials are being done, if any. And if there aren't ICD codes, we have a way in which you can understand how perhaps to to think about how to go about getting an ICD code for a disease. So these are important tools and resources that are available. And I will say that EveryLife also has wonderful tools and resources available as well. So there's a lot of spaces where you can look to find this type of information. And we're really happy with GARD that it is one of them. And a little known fact, it's one of the top 10 NIH resources that is visited by the community. So that's, we're really happy to see that traffic and be helpful to the community. Toolkit is another area where we provide educational information and resources to patients and providers and caregivers and industry leaders and regulators. And so it's a wonderful resource for those types of activities and finding just additional information. And then Radar is essentially a registries list. And there are ways in which we can identify best practices for how to start a registry and set up governance and stewardship if you're interested in looking at that kind of a resource. So these are 3 key resources that I wanted to highlight for this particular group. And I'm happy to put these links in the chat box too as we go, or make these slides available as well so that you have these links. You also may be aware that we have the Rare Disease Clinical Research Network, or RDCRN, and this is one of the, I would say, flagship programs of NCATs. This is a very large network around the country. We have about 20 different sites it's a network and consortia that are, their whole goal is to do natural history studies of rare diseases and think about clinical trials that can be done. But they have to study at least 3 diseases at a time to be awarded here. And this is a really key feature, I think, of what we're trying to do in this many diseases at a time space, to really leverage the knowledge that we're learning about rare diseases and the fact that we can leverage that knowledge across diseases to help us find treatments better. And so the other key feature about the RDCRN is that there's a very large patient advocacy group that's included, and they're required to be a part of this program, and they are extraordinarily active. And I think that sets it apart from a lot of the other resources that we have within the NIH, and it's a wonderful partnership across the board. NCATS supports the RDCRN, but there are many NIH partners that are at the table, and I've listed them here on this slide: NINDS, NICHD, NCI, NHLBI, NIMH, NIDDK, NIDCR, NIAMS, NIAID, and the Office of Dietary Supplements. These are all of our partners across the board at the NIH who are really helping us with the rare disease program, and couldn't be more excited to have this effort be more global at NIH. And then in terms of community engagement, we have a variety of partners and outreach opportunities that we conduct. We had an NCATS Rare Diseases Are Not Rare Challenge, and I would encourage you to take a look at our website to look at the key winners of those challenges. They're really fascinating. And I listed the first place winner here, a young man with Friedreich's ataxia who does a spoken word video, and it's just really powerful. The other thing that we do at NCATS, for all of our scientific meetings, we invite patients, because patients and patient advocates are part of the program to provide that patient perspective. And that is so important as we think about how to address rare diseases. And as I mentioned before, patients and patient advocacy groups are probably the most disruptive technology in the rare disease therapy development that we can have. And there's a variety of activities that we've done, even a paper by a rare disease parent that has been published, and talking really about the challenges of phenotyping rare diseases. I'd encourage you to take a look at that if you haven't seen it already. And then I won't talk too much about the NCATS IDEAS study in this talk, but I'm hoping you'll ask some questions about this, because I would love to tell you a little bit more. We've done a study to really think about, we've known, for example, that rare disease patients in healthcare databases are difficult to find, but we didn't really have a way to show it, but in the study we did. The diagnostic odyssey is real and costly. We knew that, but we didn't have really evidence to point to until EveryLife's study over a year ago, and then we followed suit shortly thereafter. And then the costs of care for rare disease patients is significantly greater than their age-matched controls. We knew that, but we didn't have data to point to. Now we do. And so I'm really excited that these studies are now out and we can point to them as really helping us address these issues. So this is just a paper of that study that I'm happy to talk a little bit about more. But here's the bottom line. Rare diseases cost 3 to 5 times more than a person without a rare disease. And when you extrapolate that to 30 million people, that's $400 billion in total direct medical costs in rare diseases. And that's just the direct medical costs. And when we talk about the Every Life study that was done prior to this, they found a number very similar to this, but then we're able to extrapolate this to even looking at the indirect medical costs and other costs. And when you add those, it's up to $1 trillion a year in rare disease costs. So rare diseases are common, they are costly, but they're also actionable. And that's where we're really excited to be able to contribute to this, to the research into this space. This is just a slide on the burden of rare diseases that was conducted with Every Life and NCATs and a few other groups as well. And I'm hoping that I can talk a little bit more about this in the questions, but I can hopefully answer some of that, the ideas that came out of this for you as well. But ultimately, what this does is this gives us a better understanding of the disease burden on rare disease patients. And it's going to help us inform what priorities we should be doing for rare diseases. And so I'm very happy to say that we've gotten a great start on this, and we're continuing to move forward with the 3 audacious goals that I mentioned earlier. And what can you do? This is really my last slide. What you can do is you're welcome to join our NCATS council proceedings. I felt a little funny actually putting this on a slide. I don't know that you really want to join our council proceedings, but they're kind of fun. And it is a good place to get up-to-date information on what we're doing at NCATS overall, and then specifically on rare diseases. You can participate in Rare Disease Day at the NIH on February 28th. Please register if you haven't already. The link is here. And today at 2 p.m., we are having an NIH chat, hashtag NIH chat on rare diseases. And so feel free to join that hashtag and submit your questions, and we'll see you there. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to you, Shannon, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you so much. I was furiously taking notes as you go, and I know from looking at the chat, folks were really responding to your presentation, and we're learning a lot. So thank you so much for presenting all of that. It's such an understandable, approachable format, because sometimes the science gets a little heavy. So I understood it, which is a good thing.
Excellent.
Yes. Questions are already coming in, and I know that as a federal employee, you're not able to lobby, but someone asked about the annual budget for NCATs and what are resources you wish you had?
Well, it's a great question. Our budgets are public knowledge, so we do actually make them available. And I don't actually know if FY21 is out yet, but I think it's pretty close. And our budget was it's about 850 or so million per year is a recent budget for NCATs as a whole. And if you were to look at our website, and I think FY21 will be out soon, and we're probably talking about 10% of that is devoted to rare diseases. I will say that the NCATS budget is a little bit different if you were to compare it to other NIH ICs. We have a very large portion of our budget that is dedicated to the Clinical and Translational Science Award program, which is a hugely important program on clinical and translational sciences. And that has a set sort of line item within our budget. We also have activities around something called Cures Acceleration Network. The Cures Acceleration Network is a program that was originally back in the day when it was first being discussed, the idea was to give it about $1 billion. And then it was ultimately it got authorized at about $500 million per year. But when it ultimately came into being, that budget was never realized. And so now we can spend up to $60 million within that resource to do a variety of activities around the Cures Acceleration Network. And a lot of those activities revolve around rare diseases. So we really try to do as much as possible in the rare disease space with the budget that's not necessarily allocated to any specific resource. And we're excited about that budget, and we can do a lot with it. But obviously, we'd be happy to do more with more, and have ideas of if there's a windfall, we'd be happy to figure out really good ways to do that.
Wonderful. As you were talking about the lab at NCATs, which I've seen and is pretty impressive, how is a disease identified and prioritized for drug repurposing in the NCATs lab?
Oh yeah, so that's a great question. So the drug repurposing program is, I'll just take a step back for all of the FDA approved drugs. The NCATS labs has a resource. It's a collection of all of the compounds that have been approved by the FDA, and that collection of compounds is about 10,000 compounds. So what's really nice about that collection is we can screen those compounds, and they've already gone through various stages of regulatory approval. We know how they behave in humans. And so part of our activity around drug repurposing is to screen those compounds that have already gone through certain phases of the regulatory process. And so for any new disease or therapy that we're thinking about, or new target, that's one of the first things that we do. And we work with the community. The scientific community will reach out to us to say that they have a potential target. We'll evaluate that and see if it's something that would be useful for a screen like this that we can do for our repurposing program. And if we find something in that as a hit, so to speak, since we're already down the process, fairly far down the process of what that drug might look like in terms of a regulatory process, we can shave off maybe even up to 5 to 8 years off the time frame of otherwise a drug that wouldn't have been in that collection, because you'd have to go through all of those regulatory stages, which can be quite timely, time intensive. It takes about 15 to 30 years to get a drug to market. So any way that you can shave off that time, the better off we would be. And so I think that's one of the ways in which we're looking at rare diseases as a potential opportunity to use the drug repurposing program in case there are compounds that are further along. But I'll say another area that is really important for rare diseases, and as I mentioned, rare diseases are, many of them, over 80% of them are caused by a genetic mutation. And because that's fairly common across rare diseases, we can use that information a little bit more strategically and think about things like gene therapy or gene editing approaches, and build platforms around that kind of delivery so that we can create the delivery device, so to speak, but the gene for any given rare disease would be the difference across the gene therapy or the gene editing approach. That would be different across many rare diseases, but we can use that as a platform to build treatment approaches for many diseases in that way. And so that's another way that we're looking at thinking about treatments for rare diseases.
Great, thank you so much for that. Can you talk a little bit about your approach with platform technologies and the recently launched Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium?
Yay! Thank you. That's a great question, and it follows along perfectly about what I just said. So I mentioned the gene therapy kinds of approaches, and the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium is exactly doing this. And what's so exciting about the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium is that it's a public-private partnership with NCATs, and I'm very proud to say 11 different institutes and centers at the NIH are involved in this activity, with NCATs as the lead of it. Also, we have about 15 industry partners and organizations who are also involved in this program. And we are working hand in hand with the FDA. And so the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium is this public-private partnership coming together to think about how to use gene therapy, and specifically around the adeno-associated virus, to be used as a delivery device for these different rare diseases with genetic mutations. It feels kind of weird to talk about viruses in a pandemic, but the adeno-associated viruses are fairly benign in this regard. They aren't really immunogenic. They don't cause disease. And so these are very safe vectors to use. However, the technology is still advancing, and there have been problems before in using these types of virus approaches. But with Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium, we're using special kinds of vectors that are not very immunogenic, and we have processes by which we can really make sure we evaluate any underlying issues or conditions within the patients that we're working with. But we're also able to target specific end organs where that genetic mutation is really the issue. And so we can really minimize those other effects if we're able to do this very, very well. And so that's why we're working hand in hand with the FDA to make sure we do this very, very responsibly. But we're very excited about this approach because of this idea that if that sort of delivery device approach works, then you can think about it as a delivery device. When you go to the post office, they have those little, if it fits, it ships boxes. That's how I think about these adeno-associated viruses. You just package the DNA, the gene that doesn't have the mutation, that will fix the mutation. You package that inside the box and you ship it into the body, and it will fix it. That's the whole idea. It's very simple. Of course, the biology is complex, but our Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium is really starting to dig into how to do this appropriately and properly, and to really hone in on those delivering this to the right end organs and make sure that the genes are able to fix the genetic mutations within a few of the rare diseases. And it's really kind of a pilot in a way, because we won't be able to study many diseases, but we'll at least pick a handful that allow us to explore different end organs and different diseases to make sure that we can show proof of concept. And then we will build, everything will be public knowledge, and we will build and make these available to our research community so that they can pick up the ball and carry it forward. So we really hope that this will have a big impact over the next decade for rare diseases.
Amazing. Another effort that you all at NCATs are leading is the zebra triggers to reduce and eliminate diagnostic odyssey. Can you share more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So we do affectionately call it the zebra trigger, and it sort of has taken off as the sort of moniker for this program. But essentially, the old medical school adage for medical students is that when you hear hoofbeats, think of horses, not zebras, right? So that's kind of what we're playing on here. And what we're trying to say in this awareness of rare diseases is that the new adage should perhaps be, when you hear hoofbeats, think zebra when you have or see what we're calling these zebra triggers. And so when we can look at the medical records, we know that there aren't many ICD codes for rare diseases. So you can't really see them in medical records, unfortunately. And hopefully that's something that we can start to tackle. But what you can see in medical records, for example, is that that the patient has visited a variety of physicians. We know that it takes over diagnostic odyssey. A rare disease patient might go to about 17 or so on average physicians before they receive a diagnosis. That's a lot. Why does it take that long? And if we could use a zebra trigger that is embedded within the electronic health record to say, hey, this patient has seen 5 physicians already for the same issues or concerns or complaints, that may then provide a trigger or an alert to the physician, the next physician, that says, oh, wow, this may not be a horse's kind of an issue. This may be a zebra kind of an issue. We might have a rare disease person. And that would be the trigger to get that physician to be thinking about other kinds of approaches for diagnosing that individual, perhaps ordering a sequence test, for example. And hopefully we can use that zebra trigger in a way to shorten the diagnostic odyssey for those rare disease patients. We know that it takes about 7 years on average for a rare disease patient to be diagnosed. And if we can figure out ways to leverage the electronic health record system using artificial intelligence kind of machine learning approaches and build in an alert system that we're calling the zebra trigger, that could be one way in which we're doing this. And NCATs just supported a variety of researchers to actually address the zebra trigger and to start thinking about the research that would be needed to develop these types of zebra triggers. And we're asking them to be thinking about this from the machine assistance, artificial intelligence kind of perspective, so the coding perspective, but also from a genetics perspective to make sure we have that expertise, a part of the research team to help us think about what a zebra trigger would look like, and then a clinical team to help make sure that it would be something that a clinician would be able to use within the electronic health record system. So these are the kinds of approaches that we're taking to help shorten that diagnostic odyssey that we know is so prevalent.
Well, as we know, the diagnostic odyssey is also very costly. And as you know, the rare disease community worked on a study to put an actual cost to living with a rare disease. And NCATs also published data around the economic impact of rare diseases. Can you share a bit about your study and why the alignment of both the NCAT study and the Every Life study is so powerful?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the ideas study that I mentioned, actually, let me just go back to that. I think because I have a slide on this. So this is the impact of rare diseases on patients and healthcare systems. And basically what we did was we looked at the healthcare systems, and I should say Ainsley Tinsdale is on this slide. She's the one who really led this study and has been a post-baccalaureate fellow working with us. So what we did is we pulled together 14 different rare diseases that we could identify in the healthcare system. 2 of these were more difficult to identify, and we actually couldn't identify them really reliably in the healthcare system. But for 12 of them, we could. And we looked at 4 different healthcare systems. There are lots of different healthcare systems in this country. And so that also makes it very difficult to identify people in the rare disease space through the electronic health records. But we took 14 of them and we compared them to age-matched controls. And what we wanted to do was when we could pull out their records within the electronic health record system, we were then able to mark the moment when they were diagnosed and then go back in time and see what their records look like leading up to the diagnosis, and then go forward in time to see how that diagnosis impacted perhaps the treatments that they would experience, especially if there were disease modifying treatments. That wasn't always the case for these 14 rare diseases, but for some there were treatments that were available. And it turns out that what we found is that there is this sort of 3 to 5-fold increase in costs of the patients who have a rare disease in these 14 that we studied compared to their age-matched controls. And that's how we came up with this number of $400 billion in direct medical costs associated with these rare diseases. So this is a pilot, we call it a pilot study because we were only able to look at 14 in these health record systems. Imagine if we were able to have the information for all 7,000 or more rare diseases. We're probably even underestimating this. And so this is very useful information, though, to really be thinking about this. And so when we got together with the Every Life Foundation and really partnered with Annie and a variety of other groups who helped us with this health affairs article that we recently published. We put all of our studies together, and what was fascinating is that, as you can see on this table on the screen, for the direct medical costs, Every Life Foundation came up with $418 billion. That number, completely using a different approach to understand the direct medical costs of rare diseases, was remarkably similar to our number. And it just gives us extra confidence that we're on the right track here. And so it gives us also a lot of confidence that we're missing the indirect and non-medical costs and the cost per year totaling around $1 trillion, as Every Life points to. I think those are very, very close to being right. And as we learn more about rare diseases, as we start to identify them better within the healthcare systems, I think we'll even see that this is probably an underestimate. And so the more we can do to tackle this diagnostic odyssey, get people into the treatment community and a path for that treatment better, these costs, they're not going to go down to zero. That's just not going to happen. But what we did find out in our study, in the IDEA study, is that for those individuals who were diagnosed, they continued to have treatment and other medically related costs, but they were lower than those who didn't have a diagnosis, who still had a rare disease but didn't have a diagnosis. Those who didn't have a diagnosis and had a rare disease stayed in the hospital a little bit longer. And so there are even additional costs associated with that. So this type of study is so important to help us understand the public health nature of rare diseases and why and how we can start to tackle that.
Wonderful. I think we have time for one more question. You've shared so many amazing resources today. But for those who are learning about NCATs and your team for the first time today, how do you suggest they approach engagement with NCATs?
Great question. There are probably a variety of ways. I think our website is probably the best place to go to. And I will say, I have actually on this slide I'm showing right now, there's a link to a mailbox, ncatsinfo@mail.nih.gov. And that routes it to an NCATS inbox, and we read every single email, and we will route it to the appropriate place within NCATS if you're interested in learning more about treatments, or if you're interested in learning more about registries or GARD, we can point you to the right place. And I'd also just recommend going to those 3 resources that I mentioned before, the GARD database, the rare disease toolkit, and the RADAR rare diseases registries links to find additional information on how to engage that way. And I think these other areas in terms of what you can do, participating in Rare Disease Day, joining our NCATS councils because they're so exciting. But that is a way to learn about what we're doing at NCATS and on rare diseases. These are all video cast, and so you don't have to join them on the days, but you can sort of find video casts of what's been discussed. And look for recent events and activities on our NCATS webpage. If you're interested in any new meetings or scientific organizations that might be relevant to what you're thinking about, those are generally available and open as well. Summaries are available that you can read about and learn more about. So I hope those are a variety of ways in which you can reach out, and I hope we hear from you.
I love it. I think that's the perfect place to stop, because if you do have any more questions or want more information, you have an email address right there that you can get in touch with the team at NCATs. So thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Rutter. It's always a pleasure to see you and hear you speak. And for our participants from Rare Disease Week, we will start officially our legislative conference for today at 1 p.m. So you can head back to the platform after you take a little bit of a break. And we're going to start off with our deep dive on newborn screening reauthorization and beyond at 1 p.m. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we will see you again soon. Thank you.